someone needs more help with reading or math, or someone has that, but they need enrichment extension in so they can even go deeper, then we provide that for them so they can each reach their full potential, that you treat others the way you really want to be treated. And that's a great principle. And when I meet you, I want to treat you with kindness like I want to be treated. But then as I get to know you, I need to shift to the platinum rule where I'm looking and saying, okay, Gearl Loden likes to be treated this way, but Yannick, he likes to be treated a different way. So I can treat you and give you what you need. Just like with employees, I don't have to be recognized with a plaque, but there's some people, they want the public recognition. Others just want a pat on the back. Well, if I can connect with what they want, then I can meet their needs and they'll feel supported and know that Dr. Loden values them.
What if you turn hardship into greatness, anger into serenity? Everything changes. Make your life a masterpiece. Welcome, I'm Yannick, your host, and now joining me, Dr. Gearl Loden. Dr. Gearl Loden is an award-winning superintendent of Nixa Public Schools in Nixa, Missouri, and now he joins me here on the podcast. I'm so blessed to have you on the show, Dr. Loden. Welcome.
I am excited to be on the show today. And I know I've looked at several of your podcasts, and it's nice to be on a show where someone's focusing on really adding a lot of value and helping others. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much. So, the first question, if you had to introduce yourself in one powerful sentence, what would it be?
That's a very good question. And if I had to describe myself, I would say that I'm a person that's passionate about leadership and just being able to add value and help others. Leadership is about service.
I love that. And right now, we really go deep a little bit into who you really are. So, we get some context, especially for our listeners. So, what do you believe is your purpose in life? And how does that shape your actions?
As I've evolved as a leader and as just a human, you want to know that you're where you need to be, where you're designed to be. And as I've evolved and learned over the years, my passion, my love, and where I'm alive is where I'm in a situation where I can serve others and provide value. And I have this passion inside me about helping other leaders or aspiring leaders. And that's one of the things I love is just knowing the legacy that I'm trying to live out and lead at my is being one that I'm able to make people better than I am.
What do you think? Who was the most critical person in your childhood or youth that really shaped you in the way that you can really look back and say, yes, I think I really had this or that threat from this or that person?
Yannick, in life, you have a lot of different people that shape you. So no one person is probably the one person. You have a lot of different people, but my family, my grandparents, my parents are the ones that would have impacted me more in my life just because I was around them every day. You're learning lessons from them, learning things to do, not to do, and just learning about life. And I would have to say, going back to my childhood, I was the only child, and my parents, my dad did not graduate from high school. He stopped after sixth grade. My mom graduated from high school. They both worked in factories, and they worked hard. And they were in that generation where you work hard, you stay in a place for your whole career. And the one thing that shaped my life, that changed me more than anything, and today would be the fact that when I was 9 and in fourth grade, my mom was diagnosed with a severe type of cancer. And at one time, family members were being called in. And I'll never forget, she kept saying, I pray every night that I get to see you graduate high school. I want to see you be successful in life. And then when I was 11, she had a different type of cancer. And then at 15, a reoccurrence of the original. So seeing how that changed my family and how my family pulled together around that and how she experienced life, just that knowing that you could die, that being able to put the right things in the right places for your priorities, where a lot of people at that age, when she was in her early 30s, would have been thinking about buying more things and doing more things, the value for time and family. So that's my mom, I would say, and my dad both really influenced me a lot in life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I think it really speaks to your path and who you really become as a really an outstanding leader. I have read a lot about you, and really the service is really at the very center of who you are, and it really shows in your action and in your really success that you had and continue to have. Now, what's education according to you, specifically K to 12, but then also education in terms of self improvement? So, if you can just give us a framework of what you understand of education, what it ought to do, and where we might, we still can, of course we can always, but we can especially still improve.
When I talk about education, I need to back up for a minute to my own background. But, going back to my family, when I went to school, now, at one time period in the States, everyone didn't have kindergarten. It was optional. So I started in first grade, and I was one of the kids that had a late summer birthday. So I was younger than others too. And I had to have speech therapy at that time, remedial reading. And they didn't have, at least I was not aware of the fact that I was dyslexic until I was an adult. And then when I had our first child, we realized he was ADHD. And my doctor laughed and said, "You are a poster child for an adult that has ADHD and it's never been diagnosed. You just figured it out." Uh, and then in school, one thing I did not like was art. Did not want to touch art because kids would make fun of me because I'm colorblind. So what looked good to me would not look good to you. So if you look at all the videos of me or anything, usually it's going to be something very simple like a white shirt or a blue shirt, plain tie. So knowing that I had great teachers along the way, like the year that my mom had cancer, I had a fourth grade teacher that was a cancer survivor. And so when I look at education, education is something that has benefited me tremendously in my life. And the fact that I was not your traditional child where everything was rosy, which we have the majority of our kids are coming in with some type of baggage today. And a good hope for our future is the fact that we'll have viable schools for our children across the land, not just the United States, but all countries, that we can offer a quality education for every child. And I understand that the people that have lots of money may send children to private schools, and that's their option. And but the average person's going to trust their teachers in their public schools and their local communities. And we're all designed with a certain type of ability, skill set, things that we love that we're naturally gifted at. And having teachers and support staff members that encourage children to take risks and to fail because that's their first opportunity or attempt in learning. Try things and see what you're good at or not. And then let's point you towards your talents so we can help you to have a career that you enjoy, where you're working in your talent zones and you get up every day. And even though it might be called work, it's not work, it's your passion. And you're plugged into what you are meant to be doing for a living. I mean, the foundation of education is citizenship education, having educated citizens that can be productive. And I hope we don't go backwards from that because, I mean, your country's been blessed with a wonderful education system that's always ranked in the top tier. And, the sister states, Canada, Australia, the UK, the States, we all have a lot more in common. And not just us, but we're all kind of connected with systems that have been known to thrive. And we don't need to allow a child that just because of their background or the zip code and the income level that not to have a quality education.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's a continuous process. Obviously, that's really it's also really reflects life. But I really also appreciate really your story because it shows a lot. Where you're coming from, but also what you have been through, and what is really possible for any child, and that there is no really obstacles that can be overcome. But I think one thing I think it's very powerful in your case is that you are able to really use that this background too. You were mentioning in talking about your parents, they were hardworking. How has their hardworking attitude of working in a factory influenced the way you see education and really life in general?
Oh, I was blessed with a dad that he thought that working half a day was working 12 hours. So he would work his job, and he always had other jobs around home, and I would help him. So you would get out of school and work. So even in high school, I worked way more hours than I should have, but that was part of helping out our family. But that background, one story he would tell was, and he would get mad because he would go into work early and then drink coffee before they'd start. And he's like, "You're going to be different." I'm like, "Dad, what do you mean?" Well, when we talk about college and I talk about I want you to go to college, a lot of the people in the factory are like, well, why would I want that for my kid? They're no better than I am. And he's like, I want you to go to college. The expectation was I would go to college. Now, my parents didn't have the knowledge about how to navigate the system or all the different fields you could go into. But the family members I had that had been educated were teachers. And I could tell by that I had an interest in it. And after about 10th grade, I told one of my teachers, I believe I want to be a teacher and a principal. And I kind of locked into that. And that was a pathway. And having parents that supported you, and even though they may not know everything, they were not afraid for me to and would encourage me, go and talk to the counselor, go and talk to some of the people that are teachers and ask them about what teaching's like and what the field is like. So they were very, very supportive. And that was nice. When you have your parents behind you, wanting you to do well and encouraging you and helping you find a way, you can make things happen. That's one thing I love about the jobs I've had. I've been in some very high poverty places where, we're 80% of the children were eating a reduced or free lunch rate. And you look at the kids, and some of the greatest accomplishments are coming from children that really struggle. And if you look at our great writers, you look at some of our best leaders, their backgrounds have not been your traditional two parents, two cars, everything's very nice, vacation type parents. And we have a lot of good kids that come from two parent homes that do well too. And that's the thing about that's fun about education. You take every child in your community and you're going to roll up your sleeves. And I know at times now it seems like people use equity as a bad word, but equity is looking at each child and giving them what they need to be successful. And if someone needs more help with reading or math, or someone has that, but they need enrichment extension in so they can even go deeper, then we provide that for them so they can each reach their full potential.
Yeah, and it's so true what you are mentioning. It got a bad kind of turn on equity, but it's really differentiation ultimately what you do in order to really empower a kid if it needs a little bit more, help in this or in that. And so this is so important.
And
Now,
I'll use critics of that. I'll use this with, most faiths that are out there are going to have some type of system where they say they have a golden rule principle that you treat others the way you really want to be treated. And that's a great principle. And when I meet you, I want to treat you with kindness like I want to be treated. But then as I get to know you, I need to shift to the platinum rule where I'm looking and saying, okay, Gearl Loden likes to be treated this way. But Yannick, he likes to be treated a different way. So I can treat you and give you what you need. Just like with employees, I don't have to be recognized with a plaque, but there's some people, they want the public recognition. Others just want a pat on the back. Well, if I can connect with what they want, then I can meet their needs and they'll feel supported and know that Dr. Loden values them.
it's so true. It's like, with one friend, you like talking politics, with another, you like talking sports, right? It's just like, and again, it's about through these human connection that you get to know someone, more closely, and therefore you adjust your whatever you're talking about, right? That's just human, right? And it's actually, it's really common sense in that sense. But yeah,
I
so
know,
good
and
point.
it seems like the universal thing we all talk about at first is the weather.
Exactly.
Of course,
Exactly.
I think I mentioned to you when we did the pre-conference that my sister-in-law lives in Olds, and she was originally in the States, and she's been up in Canada for several years. And when it's cold here, and I'm feeling sorry for myself because it's like 0 degrees, Fahrenheit, I'll look and it's like minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit there. I'm like, no, we're okay. Zero's not bad at all.
Exactly. What do you recommend to improve self confidence? Because as a leader, especially in your position, you have to have a certain confidence. And I think that's to some extent is also the bedrock of really us doing anything. Because if you are not confident, with whatever it is, you won't take the first step and the second and so on and so forth. So tell me what you do in order to enhance or even improve your personal confidence, and how did you really start? Because a lot of people actually struggle, especially young people, let alone social media, which is really hard to navigate, right? If you're not very conscious about that, then a lot of people have a lot of anxiety, not a lot of self-confidence. So how do you boost that? So walk us through how you do it.
If I can use a couple principles, there's a rule that's a 70-20-10 rule where you learn 70% by experience, 20% by having a good coach or mentor. When I started out in my career, it was really, having good mentors around you, people that had done the job you could talk to. And then the other 10% is really going to workshops and learning and reading books. But I hate to say it, but it seems like the 10% where you're going to workshops and reading books, you really get excited and you come back, but then you get hit with reality. You go to a teaching conference and you're going to go back and use these things, and then you get hit with reality and you end up going back to what you know. But early on, I was just like anyone else, difficult conversations, get just really worried about them. The fear would take over and you'd have so much fear. And then years ago, when I started out in admin, I read an article and it said that 80% of the things you worry about don't ever happen. And that really connected with me. And I got to thinking, that really has happened a lot. I've started looking at a few of the things I dealt with where I really had fear. And then it wasn't danger, it was just fear, worrying about yourself sick about the worst case scenario. So I started two different things. I started looking at things and planning. Okay, if I go into this, what's the worst thing that can happen? Now, of course, default, you say, oh, I can get fired. Well, no, what's probably the worst thing that can happen? And I would start planning out, okay, well, what's the best thing? And I'd plan out all the different scenarios. So if I started making decisions, I could detail if it was going the way it should or should not, and I'd already have contingency plans. The other thing was something very simple was reflecting and getting quiet and calm and looking at yourself inside. This decision needs to be made. Why am I not making it? And I literally force myself to make the decision and go into the fire and make the decision. And I think at times there are a lot of leaders that are afraid to do that. And that's one thing that set me apart in my career. And I do coach some people. I'm a full-time superintendent, but I do some coaching too through the LLC that I have. And one activity that I love doing, like if I'm working with you, is and you're having to really have to have difficult conversations or whatever, I'll have you to talk it through yourself so you hear yourself. Because when you're hearing yourself talk it back through it, it makes sense. But sometimes your ego gets in the way and other things, and you just let fear overcome you and you overtake you and you don't make the decision. But by that mentoring part where you have someone and we go through the scenario and yes, you're going to do it. And then I'm going to follow up with you and ask how it went, have a debrief. Just knowing you're going to talk to Dr. Loden in a week and he's going to ask you, how did it go? I think some of that, having the accountability partner, that mentor that said, how did it go? You're still planning it all out. I'm just asking questions to get you to get it out on paper. That seems to help. So I would encourage people, hold yourself accountable and find the decision that you know that you're delaying, that you need to make, and get calm, get quiet, get your mind quiet. And if you have these weird negative thoughts, say, that it's just a crazy thought, and get calm again and go, now I'm going to do this. Now, what are the steps I'm going to take? And then set yourself up a timeline. And then find mentors. And I have mentors, the same mentors I've had for years, and I'm adding new mentors. I have coaches that coach me. Having a different variety of people with good skill sets that can help you and walk you through, because there's certain things that your ego and that internal protective dinosaur brain from the past where if you self-sabotage, they can override ride you, and you know you should do it, but I'm safe. I know I'm not where I really need to be, but I'm safe where I'm at, and then you just don't do it.
I,
Plus, when you're in leadership, there's some employees that you just don't want to talk to. You know it could go bad. But what I've learned with that too is the ones I plan out for that could go bad end up going well, and the one that you would think should just be easy peasy, the person makes it a bigger deal than it really is, and I'm like, wait, this is just a simple conversation, and you're taking it to heart. So when you're dealing with humans, you don't have everything figured out. I don't after 34 years, and that's what makes the job fun. You're always learning.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And also, you also mentioned actually reflection, how important it is. And it's actually Confucius who said there are three levels of really learning. The first, the noblest one, is really through reflection. The second one is through imitation. And the last one is through experience, right? And so, what made you become and realize that reflection can be an incredible, valuable tool in order to really increase your effectiveness in leading people and organizations?
I believe a lot of it goes back to the mentors and experience. And by nature, when I look at like my Clifton Strengths Finder and DISC and others, I'm inclined to be very futuristic. So when I'm working on myself, I'm trying to make sure I focus on the present and enjoy smell the coffee, smell the roses, enjoy my family, and be present. So,
Coffee, very
oh
important,
yeah, oh
very
yeah, I'm gonna have
important.
coffee. Hey, it's 4 o'clock and I got
Yeah.
coffee. But the reflective aspects, when I'm planning for everything for the future, a flexible mindset, you'll look at things and plan out projects, and you leave them alone and you come back to them because, your brain, you get tired or you start having tunnel vision. So I've learned to reflect on different things. Like I'll look at a project for certain aspects, then I'll go back to it a few days later and look for something totally different. So you see the different patterns there. And then I've learned to adapt a planning process that's very simple for me, where I wouldn't call it a deep reflection, but small reflections daily and then weekly, and then at different cycles of the year based on the way the rhythms of my job are, where I can reflect more. Uh, the folks that I work with one on one, I'll ask them, one thing I do that there's what works for Gearl Loden may not work for you, but we can find something that'll work for you. But a simple thing is I dedicate time every Friday afternoon to plan out in detail the next week and then lightly this 2 weeks out. So that helps me to stay ahead of all the meetings, all the things. But if I'm planning out 2 weeks ahead, then if there's notes or things I need to work on, I'm doing that. At the end of each month, of course, I'll have more of a monthly review. How did the month go? What's still out there? What I need to work on? And then I'll look at the next month. And then 2 times a year, like around Christmas break, I'm going to spend a lot of time, Thanksgiving break here in the States, Christmas break, more in depth. Where are we at with our mid-year goals? Where do we need to go second semester? And then I'll start planning for the next year. And in the summer, I do a lot of deep reflection. Where are we at? Where are we going? One thing I love that we have in Nix's, we do have a 5-year strategic plan for our district, and it's a living, breathing, a real strategic plan. When I arrived, that's one area I've learned. You're talking about being a flexible leader. I've been a very successful leader, and Mintzberg's research on strategic planning is it's not very good. It's just something you put under a chair leg to prop it up and make sure it's level. But Nixon, they've been using a Cambridge model for over 18 years, and it's a living, breathing document. That's one thing if I was to go somewhere else, I would use because it's a really good planning process where you're reporting to your board monthly. You're reporting to your board 2 times a year in deeper manners, and you have a team working on your plan constantly. Yeah, and going back to the individual, this is one of the simplest things I do every day, 5 days a week with my job. I'm going to have the three big things. I'm going to have my list, of course, but I have in there my three big things I'm going to get done today, or my big things I'm doing today. And when I leave this afternoon, I'm going to have everything finished. I tell young teachers, especially, you do not, even if you're a morning person, you make sure before you leave, you're ready for the next day because stuff happens, life happens. But before I go to bed, I'm going to review my calendar for a few minutes and things I've got to do. So that way, when I go to sleep, it kind of sautés in your brain at night. That I'm going to spend before I get on the internet or get ready for work. I'm going to look again at my calendar and things in the morning. So it's kind of really in my mind because I've the last thing I did before I went to sleep, the first thing I do when I get up. And then at noon, I'm going to try, if I can, have a little just quick check time. I try to have, sandwich at your desk or something at your desk and eat, and just kind of reflect, okay, am I doing what I needed to do for the day? Is there anything I need to correct on? And then I'll have a little wrap up at the end. And I do. Brian Tracy has a principle: eat the frog. That big thing in the morning. Do the thing you don't want to do first thing. So I try to do that first thing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing these hacks. I think it's so crucial. And yeah, Brian Tracy is definitely, yeah, I also read the frog. That's really good.
Eat the
It's,
frog. Eat it first thing.
yeah.
I know I don't have a PowerPoint up for you, but I bet your listeners they could replay that part and they'll find something in there they could try that's simple. And the simpler you keep things, the better off you are as far as being productive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's so true because the problem is usually when complexity comes in or when you just load too much on it, and then you are just more inclined to find an excuse not actually doing it because it's just too big, right? But if it's simple, you can't really, you know, um, fool yourself. And so then you really follow through.
And two, knowing yourself, we all have different zones of the day, times of the day where we're productive. So, you know, I used to beat myself up because I didn't like being up at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. And all the leadership book says you need to get up early. The early bird eats the worm. And then I've come to realize there different team members have different time zones where some people are early, some people are very creative. My zone is I love being able to leave work and go home and take care of the family. And everyone knows from about 9 to 11 at night, that's my creative time where I'm doing my blogging, my writing, my reading, my studying. And that works for me. Where a lot of people are like, I can't do that, but that's okay. Uh, but during your creative time, you need to have your creative time protected as much as you can if you're in a position that allows for that. Like when you're a classroom teacher, you're going bell to bell from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and your creative time has to be your planning time, or it's going to be after hours. And being a superintendent's a lot of that. I guess part of me is I was used to I started out teaching and coaching and driving a bus and all that good stuff. So you would be doing a lot of your studying for grad school at night. So over the years, that's just my time to study and read.
Yeah, it really makes sense. And actually, they also say that's why they're a morning person and evening person because that's really what drove us when we were hunter gatherers, right? Some had to stay up late because they had to make sure if there is like prey or whatever, like it's just danger, right? And therefore, we are just differently wired, and that's also part of just diversity. I think that's how the the really how the world runs, right? We are all
Oh yeah.
different, and we can really feed from each other. What do you do to effectively really connect with family and people and also really your staff?
Just in connecting with people, I've learned just be yourself. I advise that for leaders that are new to the profession because early on you may be reading books, think you've got to be John Maxwell, or you've got to be a you know Patrick Lencioni or someone like that. But you be yourself. When you get up and speak to groups, you may not love speaking at first, but if you try to be polished and robotic and everything's just official, it's not going to connect. But if you're yourself and you let your quirks show and you embrace who you are and you're authentic, then you attract people that have similar belief systems, but also you surround yourself with people that are totally different in styles. I mean, if you know where you're weak, like John Maxwell's law of the lid, Gearl Loden's just like him. I could pay big bucks to go to Juilliard's, and I would never be able to sing well enough to get paid, but I can do well with leadership. Well, if I find people that have different paths, different learning styles, I make sure I have a team that's well rounded. And we use, like this year, we'll use the Strengths Finder. As we have new team members on every 3 or 4 years, we'll do the Strengths Finder. We keep it for our teams when we're hiring, and we try to make sure that we have people that have different values, different beliefs, different strengths. So we complement each other, and then we spend a lot of time with our teams learning about those because what I've learned is the person that's driving me crazy. I'm like, I'm doing the same for them. So we've got to figure out how to use our strengths and talents to work together and blend and take care of each other, and we do that. Uh, and it makes learning fun. It makes your teams fun.
You mentioned that you got to be yourself. And now, when you look back, when you are younger in your career, how have you improved of being truly yourself? Because it's also a learning and maturity process, right? It's not usually, it takes a long, long time for people, and I think it's really a life journey as well. For I think it all depends on how you want to define it, of course, but it takes an amount of maturity, reflection to get more and more comfortable of who you truly are and really show up of who you truly are. So just walk us through a little bit how you progressed, if at all, throughout the years.
Oh, I have progressed a lot, and I would say if I was giving advice to others or people watching the cast, it's easy for our profession if you're an educator. I know you'll have people that are in the business world too, but it's easy to talk about that we value learning. But if someone was to do an autopsy of your system or evaluation of your system and look at it, do you really value learning? Are you learning as a leader? And are you setting the steps up in place where you have true R&D and job embedded learning going on with your team? And with me, like earlier I mentioned the kids, we want them to try different things and fail. Well, having a system in place for myself where I was not afraid to fail and had leaders that supported me in trying things. Like my board here, have said multiple times, don't be afraid to fail. Failure is the first attempt in learning. So as a leader, I would read. I mean, I was hooked on John Maxwell, other books, Covey and all the others. I would try new things and try to figure out. Okay, I'm learning who I am right now. So early on, you may be around one leader that's your mentor, and you pick up their style, but then as you're around others, if you have that learning mindset and flexible mindset, and you'll learn things as you develop your style, you'll learn things like, look, I like Yannick, but I'm not going to do that. He can do that all day long. That's his deal, but I can't do it. I'd feel like I'm naked up on the stage in front of people if I tried that because he can do that. That's his style. And you evolve and adapt your style. And I have my core DNA. That's my core DNA. But at the same time, I'm evolving constantly. And I hired a person that worked with me in a district as one of my lieutenants a few years later when I was in a different district. And he was like, Doc, you're so different here. The culture was so different, and I was a lot different. Even though I had the same foundational beliefs, I had to adjust to the community and the standards. It was just a different environment. You go from being in a small environment to a bit more polished. You've got news meeting, every board meeting, and very formal structure. So it was just more formalized. But going back to the 70% 2010 rule, if 70% of your experience is what guides you, something would be wrong for a person not to have a learner's mindset and have the same year 25, 30 times in a career. And I've experienced, we all have, where we have found people that they're veterans and they have so much to offer, but they're negative, or they don't understand how to turn the technology on or whatever. Well, learning is fun. I mean, I don't want to be 34 years in my career and people are like, well, he doesn't even know how to turn a computer on. I mean, I'm always trying new things in tech, and I'm not afraid to try. I'm not afraid to fail. And I think that's one thing that has set me apart, that when I look at it, I'm like, it shouldn't really set me apart. Other people are that way. But then when you start talking to others, you realize uh, the people that are real learners get attracted to each other because there's a small percentage of people that are really soaking it up, trying new things, and really trying. And it's one thing I like about being on your podcast, because the way it's structured, you attract people that value helping others and are lifelong learners.
Dr. Loden, I really appreciate the names that you mentioned. Now, Stephen Covey, obviously John Maxwell, all these great leaders, amazing. What is your take on, for example, picking up Covey's 7 habits of eff- 7 habits of effective leaders?
Oh,
I'm
highly
so,
effective people, yes.
exactly, exactly. Seven. Say it again.
Seven Habits of Highly
Ah,
Effective People.
exactly. I'm sorry, this escaped my mind. How do you study this usually? Because to me, oftentimes, there's like you read many different books, but you never really dissect them truly. And it's so many different concepts that you might have some book knowledge and those kind of facts, but you don't really incorporate them into your daily practice simply because there are too many, right? So how do you approach when you, let's say, you read a couple of John Maxwell's book, let's say, as you said, how did you approach it and how did it really help you shaping of who you became as a leader?
And Yannick, if I can add this too, I'm one that learns differently by being dyslexic and ADHD. Like people ask me about a book, and I'm like, I can't remember the name of the book. And then when I sit, I'm like, oh, I read it. Here's what I use out of it. So, uh, but like with John Maxwell, he's had so many great books. But the book that I have behind me that I keep as my go-to book that I've used more than the others is going to be Failing Forward. And I read that book early on in my career, and I embraced that. Even talked to my faculty because I had a veteran faculty who's very good, but trying to get that mindset of we're here together and you need to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but don't make the same mistakes over and over. Uh, I probably lean towards when my core DNA is we don't worry about a test score. Yeah, the systems that we have and the people that we have are going to give us the results. And if you look at Deming's work, 85% of your success or failures is based on the processes you have in place. So if we have issues, before I start blaming my people, I'm going to look at the processes in place and say that the system of people give us the results. So if we don't like the results, first thing we're going to do is look at our processes. And then odds are, if it's not a good process or if it's a good process, it seems to me just from me being a practitioner, 80 or 90% of the time, if the process is good, then we don't have clarity and understanding with our employees. So what do we have to do to add clarity and understanding for our employees? So when I'm looking at, I mean, very seldom do you have to remove an employee. I mean, it's just like in education, you have to really do something bad to get fired. I mean, if you're showing up and you got a good attitude and you're willing to learn, you're going to be fine. So when I look at going back to the 70-20-10, that 10% you can, is not very effective. You can go to a workshop, you can read a book, but then when you get really squeezed hard, like if you're an orange and you squeeze an orange, you expect orange juice to come out. Well, there's times where early on I would get in a situation and do right the opposite of what I need to do. And I'm really embedded in my beliefs of the power of reflection and making sure that I have time just to get away from everyone and think. So I would say being present to a young leader, aspiring leader, finding time where you can be present every day, you can reflect every day, you can analyze, okay, if I'm reading these books and I've said this is something I'm going to do, am I really doing it? And with me, the Failing Forward book of John Maxwell was so powerful for me that I actually had lessons as a principal of my staff on don't be afraid to take risks. I would model taking risks and even having a mix with other cultures where I've tried to shift that culture. I've actually gone before and celebrated failures. Here's where I failed, or had other people that were willing to share. What's the biggest risk you've taken and you've done well? What's one that you did not do well? What did we learn from it? And at different times with different teams, I've used the after action reviews, like the military uses them, but where you run sprints like you would with Agile or Scrum, and then you're looking during the process, and then at the end, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and how can we do better the next time? And one thing I've learned that I incorporate, like on the plan, do, study, act cycles. One thing that I've added is always try to factor in if it's a special project, something different, some celebration too, because I think it's often to form a team and do something well, but then we just go into the next task without taking time to just, hey, it worked out well. Let's have a little fun.
Beautiful. What do you do to feel a deep sense of recognition, worth in life, and what makes you feel truly valued in your life and the work?
Oh, well, I'm a human. So, just like anyone else, if someone says you did a good job, that's fine. I love that. But also, as a superintendent, people are not calling you at 7 o'clock at night saying, "Hey, I just want to tell you, you're doing a great job today." And I tell people when I speak, I'm like, okay, we've got 10% of the people would never, ever, ever like you. So I have almost 7,000 students. That means you've got about 14,000 parents. Then you've got step parents, grandparents. In our community, there's over 50,000 people. So I'm going into a restaurant or supermarket thinking there's 5,000 people that may not like me. And then depending on the decisions I've made in the last few days, it could be 10 or 15,000. So when it comes to me, I look at, I don't call it happiness. I think happiness for me is contentment, being able to enjoy what I do, know that I'm able to focus on the things that really matter and eliminate distractions. And if I'm able to cultivate that with my board and my team, then our teachers, it can be crazy in Nixon public schools and the teachers will never know. And, you've got the buses rolling, you've got the meals being served. We're not losing kids. Kids are getting home safely. They're learning. The parents are happy. That brings joy to me. And then being able on the mentoring side, like I was a superintendent in Mississippi and worked in Mississippi for 27 years. Now I've retired and now I'm in Missouri and just love being in Missouri. But at one time, about 3 years ago, there was, I think it was 5% or 6% of the superintendents in Mississippi I'd either hired and recruited as either a principal or an assistant super director. And now they are successful superintendents. That lifts me up when you can say that you have leaders that are out there that you have worked with and you've helped train and helped serve and develop. And I think part of that goes back to your dissertation. My dissertation was on the duties of assistant principals. And I realized that the duties were not very effective. So as a soup, I started putting in a leadership development pipelines for teachers that thought they might want to be a principal down the line, or people that were aspiring to be curriculum leaders, and just things like that, just helping to develop leaders. Because everything does rise and fall with leadership. I mean, as a leader, you take all the blame, you give all the credit away, you empower others, but you have to have great leaders and you build it. If I have good leaders in my buildings, if I have good leaders around me, then that makes our district much more successful.
Yeah, it's amazing actually how the influence it has, because it just simply trickles down and you can just really, it's tangible. It's really is. And sometimes it's kind of like, it's fluffy as a word, right? But you can really tell if an organization is led, by a leader, or not so much. So it's very powerful. It has
And
a huge impact.
I don't know if I mentioned, but I didn't even know this existed. I believe in professional learning communities. We've been using the old effective schools research that now is your HRS by Marzano, and then the PLCs. I've used them as a principal, as an elementary principal, as a secondary principal, and then as a soup. And one of the solution tree associates we were having to train us mentioned to me that we needed to try to be an international model PLC in NICSA. I told him I didn't even know what it would take. I never studied that. And he said, you need to think about it. Well, then several months later, they called and they're like, you need to try to be an international model. So we applied, and our district is an international model professional learning community. And I'll say one of the best attributes to that, I think one of the reasons that we are so successful is we have wonderful professional learning team leaders, teacher leaders. And there's been a lot of effort into investing in not just the admin being trained by the PLC people, but having solution trees folks to train our teacher teams. And then we've identified teacher leaders. So we have poured a lot into our teacher leaders. And it's phenomenal to me that, everyone's a leader. And you don't have to be a principal. You don't have to be a superintendent. And you can say, my calling is not to be that, but to be a person that is a leader of a teacher team, or to be an instructional leader, instructional coach, or specialist. There's so many opportunities if a person wants to be a leader that they don't have to be the traditional in a traditional role.
It's so important. It's same for maintenance or whatever. I mean, and to me, it's really, it really shows. It doesn't matter really your title. It really shows what you really embody and how you actually do your work. And it's so true. I truly believe that, we are all, I don't know who said that, but someone said once, like, we are all basically CEOs of our own lives, and I think it's so true. And I think we
Oh
should be
yes,
much more,
and
cognizant.
a teacher may not want to lead adults as far as like at a district level, but then they can lead their teammates. They can onboard new teammates. They can help to shape the culture. Uh, with their families. When you have a family, you're a leader. If you're involved in civic clubs or church, there's leadership roles, and usually your teachers are the ones. I mean, when I look around Nixon, Missouri, if it's any of our civic clubs or our Girl Scouts or the churches, they wouldn't be able to function without our teachers being involved. So teachers naturally lead. They may prefer leading children and children's groups, but still they're involved.
And they're so crucial as well to really for our fabric, of society is really that holds it together, right? Different organization, churches, and different clubs, they're huge. Also the volunteering that goes into these is just it's crucial. What do you do to maintain or fuel your creativity, productivity?
Using the reflective practices, just trying to evaluate where I'm at, where I want to go. Now, I don't keep an official, like, here's my 10-year plan, but I have my bucket list of places I want to go, things I want to do, things I want to learn. And even though, like, I'm an educator and people think, oh, Dr. Loden's reading about curriculum, I don't really read a lot about curriculum. I trust the people that, if you're a math teacher and have a master's degree and you've been teaching, I'm going to trust you over Gearl Loden with math, even though I love math. But I try to find topics that, like right now, I'm reading constantly about AI, trying to make sure we stay ahead on that side of things. Do a lot of futuristic studying where looking at how, I thoroughly believe we can very easily have a bubble. And what I mean by that is we're putting a lot of resources into AI. So if it doesn't deliver, you've invested a lot of funds that will not deliver. On the other side, I think it's going to deliver, but it's going to really shape and change the workforce. So having children that are adaptable to not a college and career, but college or careers where you can go both ways and you have good skill sets. So we have really revamped the way that we think of career education, and we have a lot of soft skills training that all of our children are going through, regardless if you're going into a career or college. That way you have soft skills, you have good people skills, because emotional intelligence 2.0, 70% of the people that have an average IQ will be the most successful and will beat out the ones that have great IQs because they can connect with people. But I think there's going to be great opportunities for new types of jobs that will evolve. And we can't even really imagine all the different ways things will change. But if we prepare our children to be lifelong learners, so that's part of the research and things I'm doing as a superintendent, which I enjoy that. Constantly studying about leadership. And then I'm very passionate, as you know, about coaching and coaching leaders. So I'm a certified executive coach and life coach. So I keep a very limited client base on the side where I do that for fun and make a little money on the side. And then I speak some. So I'm always trying to evolve and develop and be better there. But I love, like right now I'm looking at adding another certification in. That'll be a very comprehensive certification. It's one that's out of Australia to just have a different skill set with my coaching that's different. But I also 10 years ago I went back and got an MBA, So I'm not afraid to take classes. And my wife does the same. She just finished her she has a second master's and she's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So we're in a family where we support each other learning and going to school and developing, and two, we plan things out. Like she was in education and worked for Western Governors University for almost 10 years, but didn't have a doctorate. Knew she needed to have that. If they ever changed the model after COVID, she had been in mental health for several years as a nurse, and that just lit the fire to be a mental health nurse. So she's a psychiatric practitioner, loving that. So it's nice having a spouse that supports you. And it's nice being able to know that we're blessed where we can save up and say, okay, if you want to earn a certification or go back for a degree, you can, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, and constantly keep learning, and I think that really keeps everything alive, and somehow it also keeps you grounded in whatever you face in life. What have you learned so far about AI, and how do you think it will transform, if at all, education?
I believe AI has just like anything else. Let me say this. If you go back, you can look at the negative talk teachers had about using a chalkboard and then a ballpoint pen. And every time we have something new, people are going to be critical of it. But AI is here. It's not going away. And I look at it like it's going to be able to even the playing field for a lot of folks. Like for Gearl Loden, I'm bona fide ADHD. I'm LD when it comes to grammar, English language. I have a dissertation that was published the old fashioned way where you didn't have the internet and you did it. And I figured things out and learned. But knowing that I don't have to have so many people to proof everything, that I can know that I can have my ideas and frame out a draft and have Chat GPT to check my grammar, or I can make a video and or just record myself and then it's drafted into an email. I'm saving time for my admin assistants to have to meet with me and write all my notes. I can plug it into AI. I think what you could see if we use it effectively is there's going to be some wonderful tools that will help. If you have a heat map and say that would want my teachers to spend their time in good planning, I would like for them to be in great data analysis, not where they're worried about the data. Their data is really designed to tell you how are your children doing? Did learning really occur? Because teaching doesn't matter if you don't learn. So if I could say that teachers could have more effective planning, the AI could analyze their data and help them to vet their assessments to make sure they have quality assessments, but vet the assessments so then the teachers would have the data analyzed and they can have robust discussions about what strategies worked, what strategies did not. I mean, if you think about being able to have more time to focus on the strategies and based on Gearl Loden style, I think he needs to go to a small group in this area because he needs help. But then Yannick got it. So how can we take him and extend what he's learning to a higher level of understanding? I think that could help us out. And ways it could do that would be in the weekly newsletters, correspondence, being able to give customized reports for parents. There's tools out there already. I can give an assessment, like a benchmark assessment. It says Gerald Loden did well here. Here's some things you can do at home. The fact that as it evolves, the feedback it can help us to provide to our parents, the feedback it can help to provide for teachers. And two, your math, I'm stereotyping here. Your math people love data. They want data. They're going to analyze that they enjoy that. But an ELA person may not. They just want to know in the data, what does it say that I really need to use? What strategies worked or did not? So I think it can help to level the playing field so we can all have data and make data informed decisions without having to worry so much about the numbers, but it's more about the strategies. The fact that teachers can have more resources and help for planning without having to go and look at 5 books. Now you can have 5 strategies or 5 group activities you can use where it's brainstorm Kagan type strategies for group activities from Chat GPT or Claude or whatever you choose to use. I mean, we have a lot of teachers here that use Brisk and Magic School. And I know there's a lot of other tools, but just the fact that it's going to be available. And Yannick, I do believe this. If you kept up with a Manus that just came out, it's like another DeepSeek out of China. It's a very crazy fast AI, and it's only using Claude 3.5. But the power of it is they've identified 29 really quality productivity type tools, and they've tied them all together so you have your AI running them all. Well, we're not there yet in the States, but you can imagine now the power of when Chat GPT is fully integrated into the G Suite that we use or the Office Suite, and it can look up everything I've been looking at on my calendar, working on my teams. It can look at my agendas for my last 3 convocation speeches at the beginning of the year, and it can say, Dr. Loden, based on what you've been working on, we believe this is some of the key topics you might want to present on when you talk to your teachers this year. And it even know about some of the PD that I've forgotten about. I mean, how powerful would that be? Or now, there's already the tools are primitive right now. We're in the beginning stages, the Wild West stages, but already I've played with. I mean, I get an app update every day, and I'll play with apps. And there's some that supposedly will look at your email and all, but they're not there yet. But they're going to be.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And also, I think it will really also help us to get even more quality time in terms of team building, in terms of really accelerate the interpersonal relationship, I think, you know,
Oh
because it
yeah.
first frees
Oh,
up time.
oh, I'm glad you said that because we hear our teachers saying we don't have time to build the relationships to really connect. And now I think a challenge will be just like with anything else. If we free up the time for planning, we free up the time, then what are we going to fill that time with? Because we're going to use it and we're going to fill it up. So that would be where, as leaders, we encourage, we're buying the tools and we're going to train you. We're not just throwing them at you, but we feel like we can free up, 2 hours a week where you can have more time with your children to do the things you want to do. And then also, as a professional, freeing up that time too so you can be present when you're home and really doing the things you need to do at home and not just watching TV or spending more time on social media. I think we all spend too much time on frivolous tasks and we all have the same 24 hours a day. That's one thing I challenge myself to. I try to be super productive and I always try new things. And then I look and I'm like, wait, this person's put out 2 books this year. They've been on 12 podcasts. They've got a job running a company much bigger, running 2 companies. I'm like, how do they do that? So I'm always trying to do a better job myself.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love what you were just saying. I think that's really powerful. What gives you a deep sense of meaning?
Just knowing that I've made a difference, knowing that, the feedback that you have where you're not asking for it and you receive it, and it's the kind of feedback you're like, oh my gosh, that made my day. Like just a few years ago, I had a gentleman that he was a long-haired hippie skateboarding dude at school, and he could care less, but I loved him. I connected with him as a teacher, and he was in world history in 10th grade. Well, this has been 15 years, and he sends me a nice email. He's a teacher, and he's going to school, and he wants to go into some type of leadership. The last time I checked to know him, he was at like Syracuse or somewhere on the East Coast, has his doctorate working at a university. And you're like, he took the time to email me and remember me, and I connected with him. Or when you have people that they call you and they're getting ready for a big interview, they're interviewing for their first superintendency, and they're wanting feedback or you to help them to get ready. Because I love working on entry plans, helping you get ready for interviews, or if somebody gets in a bind, trying to help them figure out how to get out of a bind. And love that side of it. It's very fulfilling when you know that you've helped someone go through the process to get their first job, and you've added a little value there. And then probably the ultimate thing is just being a dad. I've got when you have your children. I know our first child, when we had him, we are buckling him to the vehicle, and I got in the vehicle and I couldn't leave. I'm just sitting there with my wife, and I'm like, she's like, "What's wrong?" I said, "The sense of responsibility that when I put this vehicle in drive, I've got the most precious thing in the world in the back seat, and I don't have an accident." Well, even though I'm educated, my wife's educated, there's no perfect way to raise children, but now to see that with education, anyone that's around me knows I love it. But with my sons, I have not gone into promoting education or been negative about it. And when they've asked, I'm like, "You've seen it your whole life. This is what we know." But understand, as children, I've always been in admin, so teaching is a different way. We lived a different way financially, but it's the best field you can be in. It's a rewarding field, and then rewards come back and add so much value to you. And the quality of life is such a good quality of life. Well, now my oldest son is in his second year of teaching, and he applied for early admission and has been admitted early into a leadership program and is 1 year away from having his master's and having his degree. And the district he's working at hasn't promised anything, but they're like, in the next 2 years, we're going to have some people retiring. We think you'll be a good candidate. They're not promising it, but if they're telling you need to get in school, that's a good sign. So, and then my youngest is, both boys. One's 88, ADD, one's ADHD, and they're both dyslexic, and knowing that they make great grades and they value in education. My youngest is in 10th grade, so he has 2 more years. So I'm just excited to see what he decides to do in life. So been very blessed, just people around me have been great people.
And thank you also to really take up this responsibility. I think parents are really heroes. In this day and age, it's wonderful to hear. It's huge. What drives you? Are you driven more by love or fear?
Say that again.
What drives you? Are you more driven by fear or love?
Oh, fear not at all. I'm now, now am I going to do something crazy like jump out of a plane? No, but no, I'm driven by just a sense of purpose, a passion, a calling. Uh, I'm the type of person I respect all. I love learning from other cultures. And if I'm working with someone from India and they're Hindu, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I support them and their value system. But my faith is this: I believe in a creator, and that you're given a set of skills and talents, and your gift back when you cross to the other side has been able to say, I used everything I had, that you gave me the best of my ability, and that your father smiles. Now, and again, if somebody's atheist, I'm going to work with whoever. I want you to be able to have your free will. But for me, just knowing that before I started out, am I better today? Did I honor my parents and live a life that was more fulfilling and be able to do better like they wanted me to without being someone that's prideful, oh, I'm better. But just, they wanted me to do well in life. So I've done my best to honor that from my parents and grandparents. And just being in a position to know that the struggles I had, that if I can, I mean, gosh, I'm a kid that can't read. And when I'm reading, I'm not paying attention to what I'm reading. That's not a fun kid to teach. And you got this creative mind where you're like, well, let me try this out and see how it works. And it doesn't always work. I've never been afraid not to be creative. So what fills my bucket is just knowing I'm experiencing life and being able to do things and try things and challenge others, and not being afraid to have difficult conversations and say things in a polite, professional way that challenges others to think differently and learn and grow and develop.
Beautiful. And, by the way, I think the best conversations we always have with people who do not believe, let's say, it's the same in my case as well. The most amazing conversation I always have with my atheist friends.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I feel better after, because I feel like strengthening my faith. And the atheist, he feels the same way, strengthening his belief. That's totally fine. I think that's the beauty. It will be so boring if we. But of course, there's some serious discussion. I think it's always super important about having these deep conversations about life and death and fear and love. And it was obvious that you're not driven by fear.
And I especially the aspiring leaders that are watching, you're going to run across people that have this mindset, their way is the best way. There's so many ways to do the same thing. And when I was in Mississippi, we tried to reach out to other states. Here we're in a network with about 10 different states where we share ideas. And then I started teaching at Buffalo State out of New York a few years ago. They have a program that it partners with international schools. So I've taught international educators in Colombia, other countries in South America, Asia, Eastern Europe. And you have good people with different faiths, different value systems that are getting up every day and they're working hard to teach the children there how to read. And they're using different things. And there's ways where I might think in my mindset, you could never do that. And then when I find someone doing that in a totally different way and they're successful, I'm like, tell me more. I don't know about you, but educators are great about stealing ideas and morphing them into something that will work. So I love that. And when our teachers here are using phonics based, phonemic awareness. They're using programs like Haggerty or Letters. I'm talking to teachers in Columbia that are struggling using the same programs. I'm like, okay, we've got a lot more in common than what you believe. Now, at the same time, you're learning about the differences, and you're like, wait, you're telling me at this private school in Columbia, you've got an area outside for the bodyguards. So you've got bodyguards with guns sitting outside every day waiting for the kids because they have to have a bodyguard. That's something that it just I could not even get my mind wrapped around. So we all have that in different places. You know, some countries you have cafeterias. In Olds in the area where I don't know if all Canada is this way, they don't have school cafeterias. Where in the States, you know, we feed breakfast, we feed lunch, we have uh, it's just different things. We bus all our kids where the places you don't bus the kids. And there's
So
no
true.
one right answer or wrong answer. It's just differences.
Exactly. And I think what's always so important is that most of the time we agree on the fundamentals, okay, that we want the best for our channelers, but we only basically disagree in how we go about it. But at the very, very bottom, we all have the same, it unites us. These common denominators are just here. And I think
Oh yeah,
that's oftentimes that's really missing and beautifully
and
said.
and two things I'll add to that. Like, I read all the time about closing the achievement gaps, or people will say all means all, and then I'll step back and I'm like, well, let's. You're telling me that, but let's look at your data. Are you really closing the achievement gaps? Are all of your children learning? And I mean, I don't have Gearl Loden does not have the skill set to reach every child, and I can reach a lot more children than I did when I started. And I have so many tools, but I'll spend so much time looking at as a teacher. I look, who did I connect with? Which ones did I not connect with? Why? What will I do different the next time? And I would argue, like in Nixa, we have achievement gaps, but we have enhanced learning for all of our children. And if you look at our subgroups and look at, like, if you said, look at our Hispanic children that eat reduced free lunches, look at our Hispanic children that don't, look at the Caucasian kids or African American kids or our special needs kids, they're all so far ahead of their peers in the state. Each subgroup is way above the state. And out of over 500 districts, our lowest performing subgroups are in the top 25 districts in the state. And when you put them all together collectively, because of the odds of that, we're usually in the top 1 to 2% in the state. And it used to be in the top 10%. Now we're in the top 1 to 2%. And that goes back to that belief that we're going to work hard for every child to learn. We want every subgroup to do well. And we're going to work in teams and learn together as teams. So even a district that's done very, very well can do better when you harness the power of teams and that belief that every child can learn and that you can close the sub, close the gaps. But I'd argue if we can get every child up to universal proficiency higher, that's so powerful. Because I don't want to dumb down the learning for a child. If Yannick comes in reading Harry Potter in first grade, I don't want to slow you down. I want to know that you stay 2 years or more ahead. But if a child comes in and they're behind 2 years, I'm going to put them on a trajectory of catch up growth where they can gain a year and a half every year for a couple of years and make sure they're proficient. So our model, my beliefs are a little different on that, but I don't mind sharing them because if someone believes differently, that's fine. But the system that we have has really got great results and has benefited a lot of children.
No, but that's precisely what I understand of equity is that if you have a kid who is absolutely, amazing, you keep fostering this. You don't make sure that, of course not. If he needs more because it's so brilliant, you do that. I mean, that's fantastic.
Oh
That's,
yes, because
yeah.
I mean, in the states, the ACT is very big as far as getting dollars for college. Well, if we have a child that we know, oh, they're going to show up and make a good score, but if we can get another 4 or 5 points, and that gives you a full ride to a college you would never have an opportunity to go to, we need to do our best to maximize potential and educate the family that hey, Yannick is smart. He's got great grades. He's taking the right classes, but just 3 more points, and you could go to any college you want to go in the United States. You might even go to Harvard or Yale and get a full ride. How would that change a young person's life? So we have that side. Then we have the other side where we want to know you're reading on grade level and you can have a choice of a career or college choice, and it can be affordable.
Absolutely, and I'm a firm believer that everyone is basically working on the same
Oh
vision. I
yes.
just think that oftentimes the ideas we just don't listen really to each other, especially when it comes to different points of views. Because an engineer looks at the engineering, a doctor, let's say, I don't know, a psychologist looks at very different variables. So we just don't really understand each other because we are talking different things, right? And so
But we have so much in common though. You look at dealing with people. I mean, I love coaching leaders. I can coach a leader in the private sector just as well about difficult conversations and working with teams as I can someone in education. And I know from talking to you, you have a great skill set. You're passionate about what you do. You can very easily help people outside of education, and your podcast is designed to help people from all different walks of life. But piggybacking off of what you said, from a psychological standpoint, if you have a fixed mindset and someone comes to you of goodwill and they're honest and they present the data, you'll double down and still not change your mind. So that change has to be internally of having an open mindset and saying, I want to be exposed to things that are different. I want to see other people that are doing great things that might do it a totally different way. And that's one thing we've used data for, is trying to find people that are doing really, really well, and or find a district that's not doing well, but find a teacher in that district or a team that's doing really well. And we want to learn from them and talk to them and how are you doing this, and find things that they are doing that's different. Because there's times where you may have great results. One of the hardest things to do is you put something in, like with me, I'll put something in and we get results, but then I'm reflecting. I think we can do better, but to do better means we need to replace what we're doing or really modify it a lot. So if we're going to do that, let's find that next thing. But you don't change just for the sake of change. But at the same time, if you can harness the power of your team and the potential, you've got to have that learner's mindset. And also that means going and seeing people that are doing things in different environments, different states, different provinces, different regions. And if you're blessed with resources and money and all, find someone that's achieving just as well as you, that they have double the poverty and higher mobility. And if they're equaling your results and they're doing it with less resources, you may find a nugget there that you don't even, something you haven't even thought about, that can really help you.
can more agree. It's really already time. This is just two more questions and then we are done. I can just continue talking to you
Oh, I
for
could talk to you all
hours.
day, man.
Imagine you can only do one daily hack to improve your effectiveness. What would it be?
I would go back to the one I shared earlier, and I'll try to simplify it. But if you end your day ready for the next day and you are really ready, one thing I've tried to work on, and being ADHD, oh, look, there's a squirrel type person. I really have focused on trying to do a better job of being truly present. So when I'm with you today, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm present serving you on your podcast. I want to be able to have my job ready for the next day when I leave here and go home and be present. Now, with my wife, she knows for me, well, I need to be able to unwind. So I'll go home and I've got permission. I can put my shoes on, get the dog. We can do a 30 to 45-minute walk. And that helps me to walk in the door and I'm present for my family. I'm going to look at my notes just for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not long at all. I'm not going to get back into school mindset, but I'm going to look before I go to sleep, and then I want to do that when I get up. I mean, if you do that when you first get up, and I tell someone if they're not trying that, it really helps you to have clarity and focus, and also presence. But the biggest gift we can give people, and at first I make people nervous. I won't advertise. Remarkable needs to pay me, but I use a Remarkable tablet. Before that, I would use the yellow legal pad because at that time I read where over 85% of your CEOs still use the yellow legal pad. But one of the biggest gifts I can give you, like if I'm working with you and you're a principal and I'm coaching you, or if you're on my team and I'm having our monthly meetings where we have sessions together, if I truly listen to you and I'm listening not to respond, but listening for clarity, one of the biggest gifts I can give you is taking notes during that meeting. Because if I'm taking notes, you know I'm paying attention. It shows I value you. If I'm asking clarifying questions, and I'm not trying to guide the answers or like I know the answer, we're going to go this way, but I'm really giving you the ability to share and you're open and trust me. That builds a powerful work relationship where you build trust and you're able to be vulnerable to each other. Because we've all been in meetings where the person you walk in and they're not listening, they already know the answer, or they're cutting you off with that fake. Everybody, and if you have a fake or whatever, get rid of it. Get rid of it because people know that, and when you do that, you turn them off.
Brilliant. What makes you feel truly alive?
Oh gosh, I have been so blessed in so many different ways, but I would say you have the balance and trying to be in balance, even though no one's perfectly in balance, but. Uh, at my age, you're worried about protecting your health. So, protecting your health, your family, your faith, your relationships, your finances, just keeping things in balance so you can be content. And when I was younger, I thought happiness was, oh, well, we'll buy more, accumulating more, buying more, doing more. And I've learned too that happiness does not have to be smiling and being happy, but that contentment of being at peace, knowing I've lived a good life. I'm going to continue to have fun. I do the things that I enjoy. I don't have to go like we just finished up. We go every few years to Orlando. We've gone from we got to get our money's worth. We're gonna be at the park early and stay late. Now we're like we're gonna chill. We're gonna. What do you want to do tomorrow? Let's go do it, and we'll spend a half a day of having fun and a half a day of doing just whatever, reading books or other things. So just being content.
Dr. Gearl Loden, thank you so much for being on the show and being truly a blessing to me and really to the world.
I have enjoyed being on the show and being able to get to know you and look forward to just following your career. I know you have great things in store too. I can't wait to continue to touch base with you and continue developing a relationship. And for your viewers out there, I hope, I don't know, I'm a practitioner. So I've read all the books and all, but I'm a practitioner by heart. So hopefully just a few things that were shared today can help you as you experience the journey of leadership.
Dr. Gearl Loden. That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.the-ykm.com. Meant to make you grow.